Book of Heaven, Volume 13, Part 7. December 10th, 1921. The fecundity of an act done in the divine will. As I was in my usual state, my always lovable Jesus came, telling me, "My daughter, how great is an act done in my will. See, if you asked the sun, how many seeds have you fecundated? How many of them have you multiplied from the moment you rose above our horizon? Neither the sun nor any other creature, as learned as he might be, would be able to tell you, even with an approximate number, either how many seeds it fecundated, or how many of them it multiplied. Now an act done in my will is more than sun, that multiplies, not human, but divine seeds, to infinity. Oh, how greatly it surpasses the fecundity and the multiplicity of the seeds that the sun has fecundated. An innovation in the spiritual world takes place. Such a harmony that all are attracted. In hearing this harmony, those who are most disposed get warm. Thousands and thousands of effects arise like many seeds, and since the act done in my will carries with itself the creative power, it fecundates those seeds in a way that is incalculable to the finite mind. So the acts done in my will are divine seeds that carry within themselves the creative power, and that more than suns not only fecundate, but create seeds and multiply them to infinity. They give me the field for new creations, set my power in motion, and are the bearers of the divine life. December 15th, 1921. Only the acts done in the divine will give themselves back to the origin in which the soul was created, and take life in the sphere of eternity. As I was in my usual state, my always lovable Jesus on coming told me, "My daughter, reorder yourself in me." And do you know how you can reorder yourself in me? By fusing all of yourself in my will. Even the breath, the heartbeat, the air that you breathe, must be nothing other than fusion in my will. So does order enter between creator and creature, and she returns to the origin from which she came out. All things are in order, have their place of honor, are perfect, when they do not move from the origin from which they came out. Once they have moved from the origin, all is disorder, dishonor, imperfection. Only the acts done in my will give themselves back to the origin in which the soul was created, and take life in the sphere of eternity, bringing to their Creator the divine homages and the glory of their own will. All other acts remain down below, waiting for the last hour of life, each to undergo its own judgment and the penalty it deserves, because there is not one act done outside of my will, even good, that can be called pure. The mere not having the aim at my will is to throw mud over the most beautiful works, and then the mere moving from one's origin deserves a penalty. Creation was issued on the wings of my volition, and upon those same wings I would want it to return to me. But I wait in vain. Here's why everything is disorder and confusion. Therefore come into my will to give me, in the name of all, reparation for such great disorder. December 18th, 1921. Peace is the springtime of the soul. I was feeling very oppressed and distressed because of the privation of my sweet Jesus. Then, after one entire day of pain, at dead of night he came, and holding me tightly with his arms around my neck, he told me, "My daughter, what's wrong? I see in you a mood, a shadow, that render you dissimilar from me, and break the current of the beatitude between me and you that has almost always existed. Everything is peace in me. Therefore I do not tolerate in you even a shadow that might shadow your soul. Peace is the springtime of the soul. All virtues bloom, grow, and smile, like plants and flowers at the rays of the sun in spring, and dispose all nature to produce each one its own fruit. If it wasn't for the spring, that with its enchanting smile stirs the plants from the torpor of the cold, and clothes the earth with a flowery mantle, that with its sweet enchantment calls everyone to admire it, the earth would be horrid, and the plants would end up withering. So, peace is the divine smile that stirs the soul from every torpor. Like celestial spring, it stirs the soul from the cold of passions, of weaknesses, of thoughtlessness, and so forth. And with its smile it makes all flowers bloom more than in a flowery field, and it makes all plants grow, amid which the celestial farmer is pleased to stroll and pick the fruits, to make of them his food. So the peaceful soul is my garden, in which I enjoy and amuse myself. Peace is light, and everything that the soul thinks, says, and does is light that she sends out, and the enemy cannot get close to her, because he feels struck by this light, wounded and dazzled, and is forced to flee, so as not to be blinded. Peace is dominion, not only of oneself, but of others. So before a peaceful soul, they remain either conquered or confounded and humiliated. Therefore, they either let themselves be dominated, remaining friends, or they leave confounded, unable to sustain the dignity, the imperturbability, the sweetness of a soul who possesses peace. Even the most perverted ones feel the power that she contains. This is why I glory so much in having myself called God of Peace, Prince of Peace. There is no peace without me. I alone possess it, and give it to my children, as to legitimate children of mine, who remain bound as heirs of all my goods. The world, creatures, do not have this peace, and what is not possessed cannot be given. At the most they can give an apparent peace that torments them inside, a false peace that contains a poisonous sip within, and this poison puts to sleep the remorses of conscience and leads one to the kingdom of vice. Therefore true peace is I, and I want to overshadow you in my peace, so that you may never be disturbed, and the shadow of my peace, like dazzling light, may keep far away from you anything or anyone that might shadow your peace. December 22nd, 1921. Only the purpose of loving God keeps souls open to receiving the current of all His graces. The divine will is the greatest of all virtues. Continuing in my usual state, my always lovable Jesus made himself seen within a dazzling light, and this light, melting into rain of light, rained down upon all souls. However, many did not receive this current of light. being as though closed, and the current ran there where it found souls open to receive it. And my sweet Jesus told me, "My daughter, the current of my grace enters into the souls who operate out of pure love. Only the purpose of loving me keeps souls open to receiving the current of all my graces. Love I am, love are they. So they are in continuous currents for me, and I for them. On the other hand, those who operate with a human aim are closed to me. Their current is open to all that is human, and they receive the current of what is human. One who operates with the aim of sinning receives the current of guilt, and one who operates with a diabolical aim receives the current of hell." The aim of operating gives man many different tints. It transforms him either into beauty or into ugliness, either into light or into darkness, either into sanctity or into sin. Whatever the purpose of the operating is, such is man. This is why my current does not enter into everyone, and since it is rejected by the souls who are closed with me, it unloads itself more mightily and abundantly upon the souls who are open. Having said this, he disappeared, but later he came back and added, "Would you be able to tell me why the sun illuminates all the earth?" "Because it is much greater than the earth, and since it is greater, it has the capacity of enclosing in its light the whole circumference of the earth. If it were smaller, it would illuminate part of it, but not all of it. So smaller things are enveloped and absorbed by greater things. Now my will is the greatest of all virtues. Therefore all virtues remain shrunken and lost within my will. Even more, before the virtue of the sanctity of my will, the other virtues tremble in reverence for my will. And if without it, the virtues think that they do something great, at contact with the sanctity and power of the virtue of my will, they see that they have done nothing. And in order to give them the mark of virtues, I am forced to plunge them into the immense sea of my will. Not only does my will excel over everything, but it gives the different tints of beauty to the virtues. It places on them the divine tints, the celestial glaze, the dazzling light. So if the virtues are not covered by my will, they may be good, but not beautiful of that beauty that enraptures, enchants, and enamors heaven and earth. Then afterwards, my sweet Jesus transported me outside of myself, and showed me that channels of water were opening under the sea, that making their way underground, inundated the foundations of the cities, and at some places, buildings were collapsing. Somewhere else, they would make them disappear, as these chasms of water opened and swallowed them into the earth. And Jesus, all afflicted, man does not want to stop it, and my justice is forced to strike him. Many are the cities that shall be struck by water, by fire, by earthquakes. And I, my love, what are you saying? You shall not do this. And while I wanted to pray him, he disappeared. December 23rd, 1921. The one who operates and lives in the divine will gives Jesus the field to issue new works, new love, and new power. Effects of the sleep of Jesus. I felt all immersed in the divine will, and my sweet Jesus, on coming, told me, "Daughter of my will, as you operate and live in my will, you make other new acts come out from within my will, and you give me the field for new works, new love, and new power. How happy I feel that the creature, by living in my will, gives me the field to act. On the other hand, one who does not live in my will folds my arms and renders my will useless for her, while my being is led to motion, to work, by the irresistible force of my love. And only the one who lives in my will gives me free field, and I animate even the littlest acts of my divine volition. I do not disdain to place the seal of divine virtues even on the lowliest things. This is why I love so much the one who lives in my will, and I surround each of her acts with so much grace, with such dignity and decorum, because I want the honor, the glory of my divine operating. Therefore be attentive, and think well that if all that you do not do in my will, you shall give uselessness to your Jesus. Ah, if you knew how idleness weighs on me, how it saddens me, you would be more attentive, wouldn't you? Then after this, I was about to close my eyes to sleep, and I said to myself, "My sleep, too, in your will. Even more, may my breath be transformed into yours, so that what Jesus did when he would sleep, I may do as well." But then, did my Jesus really sleep? And Jesus came back and added, "My daughter, my sleep was extremely brief, but I did sleep. However, I did not sleep for myself, but for creatures. I, as the head, represented the whole human family, and I had to lay my humanity over all in order to give them rest. I could see all creatures covered with a mantle of disturbances, of struggles, of restlessness. Some were falling into sin and remained sad. Some were dominated by tyrannical passions that they wanted to conquer and remained disturbed. Some wanted to do good and struggled in order to do it. In some there was no peace, because true peace is possessed when the will of the creature returns into the will of its creator from which it came out. Outside of the center, shifted from the origin, there is no peace. So, while sleeping, my humanity laid itself over all, wrapping them as though within a mantle, just like the hen when it calls its chicks under its maternal wings to make them sleep. In the same way, extending myself over all, I called all my children under my wings, to give to some forgiveness of sin, to some victory over passions, to some strength in the struggle, to give peace and rest to all. And in order not to strike fear in them, and to give them courage, I did this while sleeping. Who would fear someone who is sleeping? Now the world has not changed. Rather, it is in struggles more than ever. And therefore I want someone who would sleep in my will, to be able to repeat the effects of the sleep of my humanity. Then, with an afflicted tone, he repeated, "And my other children, where are they? Why do they not all come to me to receive rest and peace? Let us call them. Let us call them together." And it seemed that Jesus would call them by name, one by one. But few were those who would come. December 25th, 1921. How the humanity of Jesus was nourished by his will. The one who lives in the divine will is the most immediate to Jesus. As I was in my usual state, my sweet Jesus made himself seen as a little baby, all numb with cold, and flinging himself into my arms, he told me, "What cold! What cold! Warm me, for pity's sake. Do not let me freeze any more." I pressed him to my heart, saying to him, "In my heart I possess your will, so its warmth is more than sufficient to warm you." And Jesus, all content, "My daughter, my will contains everything, and the one who possesses it can give me everything. My will was everything for me. It conceived me, it formed me, it made me grow, and it made me be born. And if my mamma contributed by giving me the blood, she could do so because she contained my will, absorbed within her. Had she not possessed my will, she could not have contributed to forming my humanity. So my direct will, and my will that was absorbed within my mamma, gave me life. What is human had no power over me to give me anything. Only the divine will, with its breath, nourished me and delivered me to the light. But do you think it was the cold of the air that made me freeze? Ah, no, it was the cold of the hearts that made me grow numb, and it was the ingratitude that made me cry bitterly at my very first coming out to the light. But my beloved mother calmed my crying, though she too cried, and our tears blended together, and exchanging the first kisses, we poured ourselves out in love. But our life was to be sorrow and crying, and I had her place me in the manger, to go back to crying and call my children with my sobs and with my tears. I wanted to move them to pity with my tears and with my moans, so as to be listened to. But do you know who was the first, after my mamma, whom I called with my tears to be close to me in my same manger, to pour myself out in love? It was you, the little daughter of my will. You were so little as to surpass my dear mamma in littleness, so much so that I was able to keep you near me, in my same manger, and I could pour my tears into your heart. But these tears sealed my will in you, and constituted you legitimate daughter of my will. My heart rejoiced in seeing, returning in you, as whole in my will, what my volition had issued in creation. This was important and indispensable for me. At my very first coming out to the light of this world, I was to restore the rights of creation and receive the glory, as if the creature had never departed from my will. So the first kiss and the first gifts of my tender age were for you. And I, my love, how could this be, since I did not exist then? And Jesus, in my will everything existed, and all things were one single point for me. I saw you then, just as I see you now, and all the graces I have given you are nothing other than the confirmation of that which ab eterno, meaning from eternity, you had been given. And I saw not only you, but in you I saw my little family that would live in my will. How content I felt! These calmed my crying, warmed me, and surrounding me like a crown, defended me from the perfidy of the other creatures. I remained pensive and doubtful. And Jesus, what? You doubt? I have told you nothing yet about the relations that exist between me and the soul who lives in my will. For now I shall tell you that my humanity lived of the continuous outpouring of the divine will. Had I taken a single breath that was not animated by the divine volition, it would have been as though degrading and disennobling myself. Now the one who lives in my will is the most immediate to me, and in everything that my humanity did and suffered, she is the first among all to receive the fruits and the effects that it contains. December 27th, 1921. The soul who lives in the divine will puts the proceeds of creation in force, and everything she does is an outpouring of Jesus that comes to her. Continuing in my usual state, my sweet Jesus on coming told me, "My daughter, every time the soul enters into my will, she comes to reflect herself in the mirror of my divinity, and in reflecting herself, she receives the divine features, and these features bind her to the divinity. And the divine persons, finding in her their own physiognomy, recognize her as one from their family. They give her a place in their midst. They admit her to their secrets. And recognizing their own will in her as center of life, they admit her to that eternal point, and enrich her with all that eternity contains." Oh, how beautiful it is to see this little image of ours, inundated with all that eternity contains. She, as a little one, feels lost, drowned, unable to contain it within herself. But love, the carrying out of the life of our volition in her, pushes her to reflect herself in us, and our eternal waves continue in her, like a machine that never ceases its motion. Oh, how we amuse ourselves! This was the only purpose of the creation of man. By the exchange of our wills, he with us, and we with him, to form our amusement as well as to render man happy in everything. Once the union with our will was broken by man, our bitternesses began, and also his unhappiness. So the purpose of creation failed for us. Now, who compensates us for this failure? Who puts the proceeds of creation in force? The soul who lives in our will. She leaves all generations behind, and as though being the first to be created by us, she places herself in order within the purpose for which we created man. Our will and hers are one, and as she operates with the divine will, our will acts in the human will. And here begin our divine proceeds in the human will. The purpose of creation is now in force. And since our will has infinite ways, as long as it finds a soul who offers herself to letting our will act, immediately it recovers from the failure of all the other human wills. This is why we love her so much, as to surpass all the love for all the other creatures together. To our will, trampled upon, despised in the other creatures, she has rendered decorum, honor, glory, regime, life. How could we not give everything to her? Then, as if he could not contain his love, he pressed me to his heart and added, "Everything, everything to the little daughter of my will. I shall be in continuous outpouring over you. Your thoughts shall be the outpouring of my wisdom. Your gazes shall be the outpouring of my light. Your breath, your heartbeat, your action shall be preceded by my outpourings first, and then they shall have life. Be attentive, and in everything you do, think that it is an outpouring of Jesus that comes to you. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 13, Part 7. Fiat.